Well, hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're doing something very special today where we are watching 2 episodes of Psychopath Season 2. Yeah, I don't know why I thought this was a good idea. But at the time, I was like, oh, 11 episodes? That's a weird, odd number. Let's just do 10 and 11 together. Let's do them together. It'll be great. It'll be like 44 minutes worth. It'll kind of be like when we did the extended editions. We'll just do that. And I'm pretty excited to watch the last 2 back to back. It'll be great. I do know, the only thing I know is that next week, there's a movie, Psychopaths the movie. All right. I know nothing about it. Please tell me nothing about it. I don't want to know a single thing. I want to go in completely blind. But I will be watching that. I probably won't wait for comments. I may go ahead and watch that tomorrow because of scheduling. I've got a whole week. I'm gone the first week of April, and that's so much recording time I don't have anymore now. So I'm like trying to hurry and scramble to get things on time because that's just how I need to be organized like that. And so I may go ahead and watch the movie. So if you have extra comments for episodes 9, 10, and 11, they may wait till after we get past the movie if there's anything there that's noteworthy. But I'll definitely respond to your comments. Don't worry. I just may not mention them here in the reactions, but I will definitely respond to them. So that'll be good. I do have a lot of comments from Anime Annie and KA, though. Anime Annie has been catching up and saying lots of things. I was like, oh, I want to talk about that. But yeah, so the format of this video is gonna be a little interesting. I decided that what I'm gonna do, it's gonna look a little spliced, so just be ready for that. I'm going to watch episode 10, do the reaction for it, and then do the discussion, because as per usual, we usually have a lot to discuss. And then I'm going to do the reaction for episode 11 and the discussion for it. And how it will be edited in this video is the link down below will have the reactions for both 10 and 11 together. There'll just be like a little gap there, but you'll notice it immediately. And then the discussions will be linked together as one video. So if you need to pause and go listen to the discussion, you can, and then come back to the reaction. Or if you want to just watch the reaction for all of it and then the discussion for all of it, you can do that. So that's just the plan. We'll see how that goes. I think that should work. And then just go from there. So that's the plan anyway. We'll see if that works out. But I'm really excited. I have no clue at this point. Togane and Kamui are gonna have to come head to head somewhat, I guess, unless we take it into the movie. I feel like it won't, though. I feel like there's going to be a resolution somehow. As to what happens after that resolution that will lead us into the movie, I don't know. I have no clue. But Togane, Mika is terrified, and she's just working with Togane because she doesn't think she has a choice. I'm hoping she figures out that Akane... Here's my problem, though. If Mika figures out Akane's been in on this the entire time, she's probably going to freak out. She's going to be like, what? Are you serious? You didn't tell anyone? And Akane's like, you're not telling anyone. So, or, you know, the opposite could happen, and Mika's like, oh my god, Akane's been in on this. She's probably been scared too, whether Akane's scared or not, and is like, oh, I can help Akane. So I don't know. There's so many different directions at this point the show can go, and Akane's grandmother is being held hostage by Togane, who we just saw murder 2 puppies in the last episode, so I don't have high hopes. Usually like serial killer behavior, if you're good with harming animals, that's not a good sign. That's the biggest red flag there is. So I'm terrified, because if he has control of Akane's grandmother, he very well will kill her and try, because he's trying to drive Akane to have her psychopaths raise. Meanwhile, Kamui seems to find her as the savior whose psychopaths won't raise, and it's like, Kamui, if only you'd met Mikishima. Although, I don't know if Kamui and Mikishima would get along well at all. They seem so different in their ways of doing things. I think Mikishima would not like Kamui whatsoever. Even though they both kind of have the same goal, I think Mikishima would find Kamui tacky. He's not into Mary Shelley, but I think that he would not approve of Kamui's... I don't think he'd even approve of Kamui's existence, because Kamui is a product of the Sybil system. He was basically a Frankenstein creation by the Sybil system, and I think Mikishima would abhor that. He'd be like, oh, this is just something else Sybil systems created to try to, you know, make society more compliant. I don't think Mikishima would like Kamui at all. Whether Kamui would be in awe of Mikishima or not, probably, but I don't think it would be reciprocated. So there's that. But I want to talk about some comments before we dive into this and get started. K.A. noted that the voice actress for the grandmother also plays the voice of Chio, the grandma in Naruto. She's also the old woman in Death Parade. So a long history of playing old ladies. I typecast voice actress indeed. And then the doctor, he's been in various cities, in various series, but most notably for me and what I've watched, he was Knut's father Swin in Vinland Saga, and I was like, oh, that's cool. So that's kind of where he is. So thank you, K.A., for that voice actor, actress information. And then Anime Annie talks about how, way back in episode 4, the Job in the Bible talks about the story of lost possessions, where Job lost his possessions and his children as a test in his faith in God, and he was rewarded by his continued belief, which does compare to Kamui, as Kamui is kind of like this figure of God that rewards people that trust and have faith in him. That seems like a connection as well, but also it's like, there's also God as the Sibyl system who rewards people who have faith and believe in it. So there's lots of deity-like figures who are rewarding those that follow them. And it's like, kind of on the nose, right? Then you have the idea of Neo Whiteboard Kun, who's been seen in the background in Saiga's office this entire season, was from season 1. It just had all of Kogami's Makishima conspiracy theory stuff on it. So Anime Annie pointed out this really cool thing that either Saiga is in Kogami's office space now, which I kind of like the idea of that, of Saiga setting up shop in Kogami's old space. I like that. And that Whiteboard Kun was just inherited by him naturally. But I also like the headcanon Anime Annie pointed out of that Akane kept the Whiteboard Kun and gave it to Saiga as like her memento from Kogami. I'm like, yeah, I kind of like that as well. Like, she wasn't tossing that out. I'm like, yes. So I like both of those. It's, I like that a lot. And then Sugo's voice actor, Anime Annie pointed out, is actually Ginjo from Bleach and Kateoka from Daya. I was like, oh, from Ace of the Diamond. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I like Sugo. I'm glad he's out of commission right now, because that means he's possibly safe and will live to the next season or the movie or whatever. I'm like, okay, I know there's a 3rd season of Psycho Pass, but the moderators have all the orders of everything in under like black box, and as I get to them, they're like, okay, now you can click on and see what's next. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, nice. And then in episode 7, I wanted to point out there's a conversation about how the justice of society is maintained and administered through Akane, or is, I like this idea that Anime Annie brought out, and I wanted to explain it real quick before we dive into this episode, that, before in season 1, Akane went along with the Sibyl system because in her mind, the Sibyl system had this idea of society and justice that she agreed with was the best course of action. And the only reason she went along with it and kind of defied Kogami and everything was she's like, no, this is the way we have to do it. It's not a perfect system, but it's the best that we have. And we can't just quit cold turkey. People will freak out. So Sibyl system has to be maintained. And we have enforcers to help kind of be the moderators and make judgment as well, but also uphold the Sibyl system. But now with season 2, Akane's kind of figuring out, and we the audience are figuring out, that yeah, the Sibyl system has this society it's trying to maintain, but it's not really justice it's maintaining. It doesn't really care about justice. Sibyl system doesn't care about the justice. Sibyl system cares that it's a god and that you think it's infallible. So it's not really that we're trying to create a society that's ridden from crime. It's we're creating a society where Sibyl system is correct, and anything that proves it could not be correct needs to be taken care of. And that is a totally different thing. And it's like, aha. So the question is, if Akane knows that, and others know that, is Akane going to still keep in line with Sibyl system? Or is she going to realize my sense of justice and my sense of society is no longer in line with Sibyl systems? And what do we do with that? So maybe we'll find out this episode set. I don't know. And then also, before we begin, I liked Anime Annie pointing out that Akane versus Mika in the ways that they treat enforcers. They're kind of like on polar opposites of the spectrum. You have Akane, who is incredibly kind, empathetic, very sympathetic to their cause and their plights, and she treats them so humanely that she gets a lot of them on board with her. Then you have Mika, who is very much like, no, I am in charge. You're a criminal. You're just working for us. Here's the line. Get away from me. I don't want to talk to you. Do your job. And it's total opposite. There's like definitely a distance. And I like Anime Annie used the example of Hinakawa as kind of how we see that in practice, where Hinakawa, he doesn't open up to Mika and give her like vital information because he's afraid she's going to yell at him. And he's like, well, I didn't tell you because I was afraid you'd get on to me. So I just told you pertinent information. And she's like, meanwhile, Akane is like, here, you can tell us anything. And he tells her stuff, but then she also gives him a lot of work. So it's like, oh no. And I feel like Ganoza, I told Anime Annie, I feel like Ganoza is kind of in the middle of everything. Where in season 1, he was kind of like a middle ground. He was empathetic because of his dad, but he also, and because of Kogami, but he also was trying to do his job. He was kind of following in the middle between Akane and Mika. My only qualm with this season at this point is we started out with a bit of Ganoza, and him kind of transitioning to be more like Masaoka, but then Ganoza kind of fell to the wayside. I wish this season we'd gotten a little bit more with Ganoza, but I feel like if Ganoza's kind of off to the side, that means he'll probably live. I'm worried for Hinakawa. I'm worried they're going to kill Hinakawa and they're going to kill Kunazuka because they've been really prevalent this season. I am worried they're going to die, and Ganoza's probably going to live because he's been kind of just hanging out in the background like Sugo. I feel like they're fine. They're going to live through this, but I'm terrified for Hinakawa. I was like, you've already done this with Kagami, with Kagari. Don't do this a second time. I don't want Shion to end up alone. No! Shion may be bisexual. She might go to Saiga if she loses Kunazuka. I don't know. But, if you've ever seen this one artist, she draws hyperbole. It's like something hyperbole. But she has this little dog sketch and it looks like it was made on Microsoft Paint. It's just going nervously. I'll find a picture of it and put it here. This is my state of being right now. This is where I'm at with Psycho-Pass. And it's terrifying. So yep, that's me. Internally, this is Romania Black right now. That's where I'm at. So we'll see at the end of these 2 episodes if this is where I'm at again. So we'll see. You'll just have to wait till we get to episode 11 and then see where I'm at the end of it. So, okay. But we're going to watch episode 10 and then I've talked way too long, and then do a discussion and then come back for episode 11. So we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to start episode 10 of Psycho-Pass season 2. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do it. To it, Lars. So this is part 1 of the discussion for episode 10. Man, I'm really proud of Akane and her resisting the system and using damn Kogami as inspiration. My shipper heart. I'm watching another series right now where the protagonist has a ship with a character that is long since gone. And it's very sad and frustrating because we as the audience know that they're not going to be able to be together. But it's just like the idea of them being inspired by one another, even from beyond the grave, which I know Kogami isn't dead, but he's kind of like out of the series. So like the fact of how he helps her throughout all of it. And my dog, of course, is like, play with me. And I'm like, never. So the fact that Kogami is still influencing her, and I am so proud of her finally being like, no, Togane, you are not Kogami, get out. It's like, yes, so good. I was like, hell yes, thank you. I am so happy that our girl is like, nope, none of that. So I'm glad for her. I'm glad she's finally like been like, no, this is dumb. And she doesn't get manipulated by the civil system, because civil system was like, oh no, girl, you have to do this. And Akane's like, actually, I had an inner talk with my mind palace and my old flame, and he assured me that does not have to be the case. I love she gets assured to be herself and to stay true to her guns, and it's Kogami's spirit of all things that do it. So let's talk about this episode before we dive into episode 11. There's going to be a transition between this discussion and the final one. I'm sure I'll bring Whiteboard Kun out for that one, but we're going to let Whiteboard Kun get a little breather before we get to episode 11. But I do love the idea that Kamui, interestingly enough, Kamui is kind of being framed as the better of two evils at this point because they were just stunning people. They're just trying to lure out the Sybil system to get to the point where they can override the Sybil. It all makes sense what they're doing now. They were getting all these people in one location to stun them all, and then that override of the Dominator usage would override the Sybil system and make them like go into a bypass mode. I like the idea that Kamui is treating this very much like a hacker or an IT person would, kind of like how Cho would in season 1 of how do we override the system? Well, here's what we do, and we'll kind of overload it, and then it will force it to reveal a crack in the veneer, and we'll exploit that. And that's where we find where the Sybil system is, and that's how we'll get to judge the Sybil system. And that's kind of cool. It's similar in a way to what Cho did in season 1. He just went through a different means, but the idea was still the same. Makishima weeded out where the building, where the Sybil system was. Here, Kamui doesn't need to necessarily find the building. He just needs to find the general location. And it's like, okay, cool. I like that. The only thing I will say at this point, plot-wise, the only contrivance that I really have with season 2, character building wise, I don't have much grievance with season 2 at all in terms of its characters and everything like that. There's only one that I'm kind of like, about, and that's Shisui. Because Shisui, I feel like, on the one hand, if she was trying to, I feel like there's two ways of looking at this. Either she is hacking, I thought all along throughout this season that she was just trying to get on Kamui's good side so that she could get close enough to him to kill him. And that was the whole point, like to be like, this is what you get for taking my eye. This is what you get for putting me through all this, for making me dress in skin tight vinyl spandex that probably is uncomfortable. This is what you get. So I kept feeling like that's the route we were going. But this episode kind of makes it to be like, no, she's really on board with him and is totally fine with this and has drank the Kool-Aid. And despite having her eye taken and being somewhat assaulted by him, is totally fine and is going along with this like his little confidant. That part to me, character development wise, is weird. And I feel like if you're going to justify it, then Shisui needed to have like a little bit of a setup at the beginning of the season to really establish how maybe unhappy she was or how nervous she was about her psychopath clouding, or there needed to be some justification in the first couple episodes before she gets taken by Kamui to justify her character not only going along with Kamui, but being totally fine with having her eye taken out and being used. There needed to be something. And I know that the season has kind of attempted to justify how Kamui gets people over to his side. But in her case, I don't know. If I had somebody take my eye out, even if they apologized and was like, I'm so sorry I did this, I'd still be like, bitch, you took my eye. The fudge. Like, I don't think I would be nearly as persuaded by his little sentiments as Shisui is in this season. So for me, personally, that's just a little character note that I wish had gotten a little bit more expansion, but we still have one more episode. She might still be the one to kill him. I don't know. She may be the one to kill him, and we just don't know yet, but I don't think it's going that route. At this point, the way she's acting and going alongside all of them, I don't think she's gonna, I think she legit drank the Kool-Aid and is with them. And that's fine. It's just, I wish we could have gotten a little bit more to justify why she's doing that. But that's my only character grievance in this season is Shisui's character. Everybody else, I'm like, no, it all makes sense. We're all fine. But then going through and knocking everybody out. Oh, Togane is the worst. I'm sorry. Those of you that think he's hot, he is the worst. He like literally beat her grandmother to death to try to make her turn to the dark side. No. And then I was like, no, as soon as they showed us last episode, him killing puppies, I was like, nah, he's going to kill that woman and they're going to find a way to make her see it. I'm like, the Sybil system in Togane has got to go. They're the worst. And I love that Akane calls Sybil system out on all its bullshit this episode, being like, well, if you are the infallible system, you are, da-da-da-da-da. And the thing about it is the Sybil system has seemed to have gotten wise to Akane's strategy of trying to manipulate the system by using that, well, if you're a logical being, you need to do this. And at this point, the simple system's like, nah, I'm just petty. we're a petty ITAI program at this point that, nah, we're not going along with that. And it's like, oh shit, no, your strategy, Akane, is no longer valid. Damn it. But Akane sticks to her guns with the help of Kogumi's ghost, and I freaking love it. But that shot of Togane, and when he's like, when he finds her and he's like, where do you think you're going? I like that he tries to do the dominating stance next to Akane like he did with Mika, but Akane does not back down like Mika does. Akane's like, bitch, that ain't gonna work. Get out of my way. She's like, I fought worse monsters in Hollywood for years. Gets all Joan Crawford on him and like is like, get out of my way. And then he's like, but this is Mother's decision. I like he doesn't say mother. He says Chief Kasai. And she, at this point, Akane's figured it out. She's figured out all the tea. And when Mika tells her the select information that she does, we'll talk about that. Then Akane pieces everything together. And she's like, move away. Get out of my way. She's like, now's not the time. I'm not here for it. She's like, I need to go. And the way that it sounds, when it sounds like Akane is going to get involved in the mission and kill Kamui, which is exactly what Togane wants. And Mika, meanwhile, is just in self-preservation mode, which still worries me. I still am worried. I'm a little bit more worried now that Togane will do something rash than Mika. I think Mika is just scared shitless, and that's where she's at. We'll talk about her more after next episode, but her just being like, this isn't my fault. I was just doing what the system told me to do. I'm just following suit. I'm just trying to survive. And there is a part of me that cannot blame Mika for just following suit. Again, I talked about comparing her to an Attack on Titan character. She's very much like that character in terms of how she's similar to an Attack on Titan character from season 3 and season 4 in terms of how she believes that this is just how it has to be. The system is cruel, and in order for me to survive in this cruel world, I have to go along with certain things and be part of the system, and this is just how it has to be. And yeah, I kind of understand and can relate to Mika. It's just so frustrating when you have Mika almost inactive or in opposition to a force like Akane, who is actively trying to enforce justice. Right? And Mika is just trying to survive. But damn that expression. I like Mika in the darkness throughout this episode, where she's always in the darkness because she's just doesn't know what to do at this point. And Togane's damn face, where he like is a damn Sith Lord. Oh my god, that expression, the way they animate that. It's the best he's looked all season and the most evil. He went full Aizen, has the curl, it's done, the transformation is complete. I'm like, oh my god, something that I do like, because I know some people get frustrated. They're like, oh, well, we knew he was going to be a villain all along, and that's fine. There are some twists in shows that you see coming a mile away, and you're like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And those types of twists you do want to see happen, and the moment that they're executed, you're like, yes, we're here, finally. My Hero Academia spoilers, but there's a character in that series that, I guess it's not spoilers, but there's a character in that series. If you watch My Hero Academia, you know what I'm talking about. There's a character in that series that from the moment you meet him, you have some suspicions. You're like, I think I know who you are. I think I know what your character is. And as the series goes on, you're like, oh God, this is what that character is. This is who they are. And you're just waiting for the mangaka to confirm it. You're just waiting for them to confirm it. And at that point, it's not that it's a reveal. It's just, you know, the mangaka is teasing it out as long as they can for maximum effect. And the moment they give that confirmation, they flip that switch, it's just like the floodgates open. You're like, yes, validation. We can finally talk about this, and it's confirmed. And it's not that it's a twist, but the confirmation is so satisfying that you're just like, yes. And that's exactly how I feel Togane in this moment, right before the fact that he goes into full villain mode. I'm like, yes, we're finally here. Bitch, we all knew it was going to happen. It's here. I'm so excited. Finally. He looks so villainous. And it's terrifying. I'm worried for Togane. His crime coefficient's like 700 and something. If Kamui does fire at him, he's dead. There's no way he's not. But I'm like, oof. We got to see what ends up happening. My thing is, would the Dominator be like, nope. I mean, it's her son. is Kasai going to let the Dominator fire and kill her son? Now it makes sense why he's had the highest crime coefficient in the history of the Sybil system and hasn't died yet, because he's Kasai's son. She wasn't going to let him die, so she can affect the Dominator and make it stop working. Of course she can. Why can't the Sybil system? Why wouldn't it? Right? At this point, you may be questioning, well, if the Sybil system prevents judgment being passed on Togane, then that means that the Sybil system flawed. The Sybil system knows that it's flawed. It just doesn't want to admit it. It doesn't want to give confirmation, because then it's objective data. So they're just like, oh no, they could be like, oh, there was a glitch in this. And you might be like, well, but a glitch is imperfection. And they're like, oh, well, we'll fix it and then we won't have it anymore. Mm-hmm. Right? I think that it's better on Sybil Systems' end if they're like, oh, the Dominator was faulty. There was a fault in the Dominator and it just didn't work. We'll fix that. Don't worry. Than to admit something like Kamui exists and can be judged. I think Sybil System would weigh those two evils and determine that a faulty Dominator is a more likely excuse than, oh, this collective can be judged. So, but we'll see what ends up happening with that, right? We'll see what ends up happening. I still don't know the purpose of the green cloaks, other than they are maybe a way for them not to get wet. I do like that they all instantly reveal these like brown, like beige colored turtlenecks. I often say that like villains in anime wear turtlenecks. I'm thinking of like Light Yagami and Death Note. I'm like, oh, they'd fit right in. I am terrified for Hinakawa next episode. I just want Hinakawa to live. That's all I want, is Hinakawa to live. I'm not asking for much. I wasn't asking for much with Kagari last season, but we see where that went. Hinakawa is so precious. Him just stuttering and being like he's not used to talking in big crowds. He's like, well, how are we going to stop Kamui if the Dominators don't work? And I like that Kunozuka's this calming presence where she's like, it's going to be okay. Don't worry. Just hold on. It's fine. We've got this. And I'm like, oh. But then, of course, Togane is sitting right there listening to everything. So Mika manages to do something. Mika is going on the scene. She's in charge of this scenario. She's trying to like pep talk herself up, being like, I'm in charge of this. I'm doing what I have to do. I can do this. And it's one of those like, be careful what you wish for scenarios, because Mika this whole time has wanted to be in charge and for Akane to step back because she has too much personal involvement. And now's the time where she's actually getting to have that moment. But because of her interactions with the Sybil System and Togane, it's completely messed up that moment. And now she's just like, what do I do? So she manages to she kind of tells like a white lie. She tells like a half-truth to Akane. And it's like, oh, well, Kamui's goal is to retaliate against the Togane Foundation, which is partially true in a sense. But that's not the overall goal. Like, that's what it seems like. And Mika's trying to like manipulate the story to Akane without realizing, of course, that Akane knows everything because she's been talking with Kasai this whole time. Mika doesn't know that though. So she's like, they're going against the Togane Foundation and the crime and the barricade incident is connected. And Akane is just like, okay. And she finds out the Togane Foundation pushed for Kamui's surgery. And she tells Akane all this to make it seem like, yeah, this is why Kamui is a villain and why we should get rid of him, because he's doing all of this. But Akane takes that information, pieces it all together and goes, welp, that's very convenient, but that's not the full truth. And we shouldn't doubt Akane. Here's the thing. Mika, for all we know, is not a prodigy. She's just kind of like Ganoza or kind of like Sasayama or any of the other enforcers that just was placed there for reasons. But she's not a prodigy like Akane. And Akane is a freaking smart prodigy like Kogami. She figures it out. She Sherlocks her way through it and is like, funny you should say that. But yeah, the Benefit Foundation clinical trials, I don't think that was it. A multi-body brain transplant. And Akane figures out Kamui is basically the humanized equivalent of the Sybil System. Except Kamui is not trying to judge people like the Sybil System is and make it this infallible being. Kamui wants to liberate people from the Sybil System and make it to where they're not judged by anyone. So they have totally different opposite goals, right? Now, just because Kamui's goal seems a little bit more like selfless than the Sybil System, that does not mean that that does not mean that it's great, because Kamui has killed a lot of people to get here. So one thing that I think should be maintained is that Kamui is not totally innocent. They've killed a lot of people. They've caused a lot of damage. There's been a lot of innocent lives destroyed because of this person. But I do think it's worth noting that they had this entire, set of trains filled with 500 hostages. They could have killed them all. Their goal was to override the Sybil system. They could have killed them all, but they chose not to. So that is worth something. That is worth something. Does it make Kamui the lesser of two evils? It depends on where you go with this. But I do think at this point, I like that Akane's like, look, you are just afraid of being judged, Sybil system, because you don't want to believe, you want to believe you're above that, but you are just as capable of being judged like Kamui is, and you need to accept that. And I like that Akane tries to use reverse psychology on the Sybil system. She tries to say, like, well, why wouldn't you want to be judged? Like, don't you want to evolve? Isn't that your overall goal? Isn't that why you've been collecting these asymptomatic brains, is to evolve and get stronger and learn more to become this perfect system? So wouldn't you want to be judged by Kamui as part of that? Isn't that, satisfying this scientific curiosity that you have? The interesting thing is that right now, throughout this entire exchange, it's Togane's mom that is in Kasai. It is the Togane woman that's in Kasai. And she's like, no, I want to get rid of Kamui. No, we don't need him. No. It would be interesting if the other brains try to take Kasai over and voice their opinions about it and be like, well, we want to do this, we want to do that. That part would be interesting. I don't know. I don't know. I do like that Kasai tries to assign assassinating Kamui to Akane, and Akane's like, yeah. She's like, you're just trying to use me as a scapegoat to kill him so he's conveniently out of your way, because he's not an asymptomatic brain like Mikishima was. Mikishima you wanted to integrate into the system because he was a brain that would be compatible with you all. Kamui is not that. So because you can't use Kamui as an asymptomatic character, because your son is an asymptomatic, as we find out, you're like, you just want to get rid of him. And she's like, that's not how the system works. And you should let him judge you if you are really who you say you are. And the system doesn't like hearing that at all. The system's like, well, you shouldn't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. I love it. I like that. I like the idea too, that the Sybil system like integrated Togane's mom into it because she was asymptomatic, but she kind of has been placed in charge of all this by the hive mind, and she's kind of a bitch, and it's like, oh my God. So again, I love the idea that this seemingly deity-like infallible being is actually run by just a bunch of brains of actual humans, and they all have different personalities and attitudes that are not infallible, and it creates this very bizarre entity, just like Kamui. It's so creepy and neat. I like it. And he's like, we're not going to let that happen. So Division 3 is still around. There's the one guy that's still alive. And then I had to go back and think about it. But yeah, the leader of Division 3, we saw him next to like the trailer. He had been shot, but he didn't get killed. So he lived through it all. The others just didn't. And then the rest of Division 3 that I guess weren't there at the time, kind of like the Shiones of their division or whatever, they all are like, well, we're going to get, revenge for our fallen comrades by putting bombs next to these trains. And I'm like, oh my God. But that all checks out because the Sybil system's like, we just need to erase any problems. We're just going to wipe the slate clean. Don't worry about problems. They don't exist. As long as they can't talk about the Sybil system, then there's no problem, right? We're just going to, through silence, keep everything fine. And Akane's like, well, that's ridiculous. And Kasai's like, don't care. Don't care. They're a problem. She's like, they could become latent criminals. We can't have that. And Akane's like, but you don't know that in the system, She's like, that is an absurd operation. She's like, also, you don't have a say in this. It's just, I love the back and forth with this. And Akane calls out the Sybil system saying, this is just a lie. You clearly want to kill Kamui. This is ridiculous. And I've kind of seen through everything that you're doing. And then that's when Kasai's like, well, I have this trump card just in case you were, worried about, not following through with the orders I gave you. And then it's like, this bitch, her and Togane, they murdered her grandmother and decided to try to use that as, I'm glad they don't show us. They don't show us the body. They don't show us the grandmother. They show us like the blood on the screen and that she's been beaten, and they tell us she was restrained and beaten to death. But they don't show it to us. I'm glad. That little blood speck that Togane wipes off his face was enough to tell us something bad happened. And then I'm glad they don't show us everything. Mika knows now. Mika's probably like, what the fudge? But I would think Mika would have a little bit more sympathy towards Akane, but we'll see next episode. But she's like, what a cruel crime. And that's when she's like, well, Akane, you know, Kamui was involved with your grandmother getting beaten, so aren't you going to kill him? Is this enough to persuade you that he's a horrible person and doesn't deserve to live? And what I love about this is, it's a parallel to Kogami. Kogami saw what Mikishima did to Sasayama, and it triggered him, and he couldn't go back. He became hellbent on revenge, and then it became more than just revenge. It became just an obsession with passing judgment onto Mikishima, and he went through with it. But in the process of that, Akane was trying to convince him not to save his soul and to save who he is and to get to where he wouldn't be targeted and wouldn't have to go away from the Sybil system. And so at this point, Akane is pushed to her limits there. And when she's like trying to hold herself together and she's trying to like keep herself from like letting it obsess over her, and then she just screams in frustration. Oh, that was so good. And I was like, girl, don't give in to what the Sybil system wants to use you as a scapegoat to kill Kamui. And they clearly have said in this that they're not afraid at this point to kill Akane. At this point, it seems like their usage of Akane has kind of run out, and they're kind of viewing her as more expendable now because Togane's in the system and Mika's now part of it, and they find Mika a little bit more subservient than Akane is, because it makes sense. Like last season when the season ended and Akane was kind of like testing the Sybil system and like seemed like she had a leg up, I was thinking, how is the Sybil system going to get back at Akane? Because the Sybil system will eventually get tired of kind of being one-upped by a human. So what will they do? And now it makes sense. The Sybil system's like, yeah, we've kind of experimented with you, Akane. We realize you're not what we want, which surprises me because she seems like she's asymptomatic. And they're like, we want to get rid of you. You're more of a liability than a help. And Mika is very subservient. We'll just keep her around because she'll do what we want her to do and won't question things like you question things. So I was really worried that Akane was going to like kill Kamui because she was going to kill him because of what happened to her grandmother. And then she looks down at the cigarettes and Kogami's there. And I freaking loved Kogami being there and just Kogami going, hey, you know, are you sure you want to do this? And she's like, I know I shouldn't kill him, but is there any, I don't think there's an option left. And I love that the ghost of Kogami in the back of her mind is like, that sounds like something I would say. And you would tell me that I haven't exhausted all my options yet. And I love that Kogami, like the spirit of him is like, you need to fight through this. I'm like, my shipper heart. I'm like, yes, Kogami, that's right. Get her to fight through it. Get her to keep going. I'm like, absolutely. It's just, I love it. I love what Kogami represents to her and represents like her fighting through he's like that spirit of justice to her, and she feels he was done so dirty and she tried to save him and now she's using his spirit to save herself. And I'm like, yes. Meanwhile, Mika finds out that everywhere she goes, she's not listened to. And I'm like, Mika girl, the problem is Mika, you can't have your cake and eat it too. I feel like there's a sense of Mika that wants to have authority and like stand up and do things, but then she kind of has this reputation of one that goes along with the system, and the other division seems to kind of know that, and so nobody listens to her. And I'm like, girl, you've got to stand for something or you'll fall for everything, right? And if you just follow through with whatever the Sybil system tells you and you don't stand up for anything, then people are going to just walk all over you, which is what they are doing. And she's trying so hard just to stay alive. She's not questioning and like having the backbone that like Akane and Genoza have, right? Genoza looks damn good in this episode. The very few shots we get of Genoza, The animation team was like, we're going to make sure he looks really fine, even though you're not going to see a lot of him. And then Togane just slipping away and slurking in the background. But I tell you what, Kogami, it's just such a beautiful man there. Like, there's a tea set, there's the books, is she sitting where Togane's desk is? Because she has like a ship in a bottle that's right there next to her. Is she sitting in Togane's desk? Because there's a tea set and all that. Maybe. I feel like she's sitting at Togane's desk because there's the cigarettes, the ship in a bottle, the tea set. Oh my God. I love Kogami being there to be like, you've now exhausted all your options. The law doesn't protect the people. People protect the law. And he reminds her of that. God, I love it. He's like, you should already have all the pieces you need. He's like, come on, girl. She's like, I can't fail, but... And I love she kind of just smiles and he's like, when she gets like, she feels like the back of her head, he's like, isn't it worth taking a chance? Don't let them win. And she's like, oh, did something hit me? I love that. Don't let them win. Ah, my shipper heart is so happy. Like, if we don't see Kogami the rest of the season, fine. Like, he's right there. He's in her heart. He's influencing her. He's her inner Sherlock getting onto her. Yes. And I love she just goes straight to Koichi and does that. I also love that Koichi and Kamui, like the two of them, I love that Koichi and them, like, he's like, is he all right? Is my boo all right? Did you talk to him? Is he okay? Like, I'm like, I don't think Kamui's living. I think Kamui's going to die at some point in this season. I don't think he's making it out alive. I think something's going to happen that kills him. We just don't know what yet. But I don't think it's going to be Akane that kills him. I think it's going to be something else. But I'm really sad about that because I would like Koichi and Kamui to be able to have a moment together, but it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. But I ship her heart there too. I'm like, them asking about each other. And she's like, look, I'm going to try to save your man. So let me help out this. Cause I think that she's like, look, I want you to judge the civil system because that's what needs to happen at this point. She's like, they're trying to bury you along with the passengers. And Kamui's like, well, we'll get out of this alive somehow. They already figured out the bomb thing, which makes sense. The fact that the division got the bombs from the same place they did and they've been manipulating them, that all ties back to the earlier episodes of the season. That all makes sense. And I like that Akane's like, look, come to this point marked and I'll show you where the civil system is. And then Kasai's like, what are you doing? She's like, bitch, I'm going rogue. And Kasai threatens her to be like, well, then we'll take you from being an inspector. We'll make you a latent criminal and then you'll get judged. And I'm like, but you bitches know that Akane can't be judged. I feel like they're going to tell Mika to kill her. They're going to tell Mika to kill Akane. And that's going to be where this goes next. If Akane doesn't do what the civil system wants, they can't judge Akane with the Dominators. They're going to tell Mika just to kill her. And Mika's going to have to make a decision over whether she kills Akane or not. And I'm like, I don't know. And she's like, look, the judge of Kamui is the goal of Kamui is to judge the civil system. And that means you have to judge him as well. And she's like, look, you should all be embracing this. She's like, you and Kamui are the same thing. You're a concept of a collective entity. So, and I like the idea that it translates to as a collective. You know, if you're going to judge society through the psychopaths, then you should be able to be judged yourself and for Kamui to be judged as well. So she's like, you know, you should embrace this. This should prove that your system is fine, right? And the civil system's like, it's like they don't want to accept that margin of error. They don't want to accept the fact that there could be a flaw in the system because then that will undermine everything that they've presented. And I'm like, yeah, that's the thing. The omnipotence paradox, there is no omnipotence. It can always have a flaw or a chink in the chain, right? Yeah, I love it. And you kill him without judging him by denying your own perfection. And then I like that Kasai's like, you don't know what our system is. You don't even know what we're doing. And they get on the defensive. It's insane. I like that we're taking the concepts from season 1 and being like, nah, here's the real problems with the system. And Akane's like, well, if you confront the problem you're avoiding, you'll evolve as well. But if you keep denying it, eventually somebody's going to come along that you can't ignore And then what are you going to do? You know, like Akane tries to use that manipulation, but at this point, the Sybil system's just like, no. They're like, I'm tired of listening to this talk, blah, blah, blah. If you're going to act on your own, I'm going to rescind your right as an inspector. And then it says we'll have to think about eliminating you from society as well. And I'm sure they're not thinking about the Dominator. They're thinking about, you know, just killing her outright with a freaking knife, like Togane seems to be about to do to Kamui. But then I like that Akane's like, look, you're just one brain in the Sybil system that's taken control for now, and you have a beef against all of this. Akane's like, I'm not scared of you. The value of your existence itself is shaken. And I like Kasai's like, man, no, you don't know what you're saying. And she's like, what you need to do to continue serving a purpose in this society is to think over that carefully as a group. Basically, Akane is like, you need to go back to your group hive mind and quit trying, because it seems like Togane and his mom are trying to hijack the Sybil system to get rid of Kamui and to stop this grudge. But Akane's like, you know, if you really are a hive mind, maybe you should go back to the group and do like a council meeting and think about this. And that would buy her more time to let them get to the Sybil system and judge it, right? But meanwhile, Togane hears all of this, because of course he does. He's got the hearing aid, and he goes rogue. And I'm like, son of a bitch, no. And then it also seems like with Shizui killing the one enforcer, which that sucks, that she had a grudge. She seems to have a grudge against enforcers this season. She doesn't seem to like them at all. I wish, like I said at the beginning of this episode's discussion, I wish we'd gotten more with her character to know why she didn't like enforcers and what the deal was. But it just seems like it's a thing that's there, but it doesn't get expanded upon, which is, She also keeps injecting herself with drugs, which is a thing. I'm like, okay. I feel like there's, again, reminding us that even though Kamui has this mission to judge Sybil system, which is something we should want as the audience, it's reminding us that he is an antagonist, and he is causing his followers to do all these drugs and stay like hyped up and doped up on this stuff. Is that the best possible scenario? I don't know. There is that to take into consideration. But then, yeah, I'm glad most of these people all get out. I'm so terrified for Hinakawa and Kunozuka. But then they were like, oh, Togane disappeared. And him showing up as the little black speck, as the shadow, as she walks out of the shadows towards the light. Oh, to meet up where Sybil's system is on the other side. Oh my God. And then, of course, Kamui shows up. Of course, right? We have this standoff right here. And he's like, oh. And for Togane to say that if it was Enforcer Kogami, he would have done this. For him to bring that up, I'm like, bitch, you don't get the right to say his name. You have been trying to imitate him this entire season, and I'm so glad Akane has seen through it, and she's like, bitch, no. You ain't Kogami. Don't you use his name in vain. How dare you, sir? I was like, get it, girl, get him. And she's like, you know, actually, why don't we stop acting? And I'm like, yes, good. I'm glad Akane has not been wooed by him. I'm glad she's like, you've been trying to like psychologically affect me. And no, she's like, I saw that whole multi-body like surgery thing that Kamui's put through. You all gave me that information. Seems an awful lot like the Sybil system that I know of. Again, Mika doesn't know that Akane knows about the Sybil system. So Mika giving her that information should make, in Mika's mind, Akane think that Kamui is like this Frankenstein monster that needs to be destroyed. But Akane already knows about the Sybil system. So she's like, you guys gave me that info like you were trying to make me get even more against Kamui, but she's like, I know the Sybil system's just like that. So all you did was just give me ammunition for me to figure all this out. She's like, do you think I'm stupid? I was like, yes. She's like, it seems rather familiar. And she's like, that's not allowed in this society, but I'm sure that your mom, who's now part of the, who is asymptomatic and is now part of the Sybil system, I put two and two together. I figured it out. She's like, I saw your background data. You've been posing as a 28-year-old. Bitch, you're 41. How dare you, old man, try to get up with me? I was like, yeah. Yes, love it. Love that she's like, yes, born June 6, 2086, age 28. But yeah, I found another report that shows that it's June 6th, 2073, and you're 41. Parts of it have been altered. So yeah, you're a liar too. You're trying to catfish me. No. I guess. Yeah, she's like, I re-examined your file. Nah. You drove all the inspectors into becoming latent criminals. She's like, I didn't want to believe it or think that you weren't. I wanted to think you weren't doing it intentionally. But, it all becomes clear what you've been trying to do. You've been trying to affect me as well. And he's like, well, Saiga was doing the same too. And she's like, yeah, but Saiga's not a bitch. And then Kamui shows up in his sweater vest. He's ditched it makes sense. He's still wearing the suit and everything from the dinner. Makes sense. He just got rid of the fancy bow. Can't wear a fancy bow in a standoff. It's not true. And then they're both there. And then he's like, your existence demeans my mother. Okay, Norman Bateman. And then when he points the Dominator, 769, that is insanely high. And of course, Akane is like, oh, don't just kill him. Wait a minute. We might need him. So, shit. All right. I don't know. So yeah, I'm gonna get it ready for episode 11, final episode. We're gonna see how this goes. But I'll be back real soon with the rest of the discussion. Well, oh man, we did it. We made it through season 2 of Psycho-Pass, and we made it through season 2 of Psycho-Pass, and guess what? Hinakawa lived! Yay! And Kunozuka lived! Yay! Okay, first and foremost, I do want to acknowledge that, do I think this season is as good as season 1? No. I don't think it's as good as season 1. I think season 1 has such a beautiful full circle story, and the climax, it builds up to that climax, and it's so good, and it's so theatrical because Mikishima's theatrical, and Kogami's there and all that. So yeah, if you're trying to compare, it's like comparing apples and kiwis, I guess, is the best scenario, right? I feel like when you watch season 1, it's such a cohesive full circle story that it does definitely feel like a full circle moment. However, I will say, season 1 definitely feels like Kogami's story almost more than Akane's. It feels like Akane comes out of her shell a little bit. It feels like, but season 1 is Genoza and Kogami's story. I feel like more than anything. You have the whole deal with Masaoka. You have the whole deal with Mikishima and Kogami. Akane feels like she's starting to evolve as a character in season 1, but she hasn't really come out of her shell until the last couple episodes because of what's going on with Kogami. So I do like season 1, I think, more than season 2, but the people that were in the comments trying to be like, season 2 sucks, I don't think that at all. I like season 2. I thought this was a good season. I did not have problems with this season. It definitely doesn't have like the big bombastic dramatic moment at the end like it does. There are a few character choices and some things I want to talk about in this episode with this discussion that I think are a little bit confusing and a little bit like, but I really enjoyed this. The whole last 2 episodes of Togane going into full Shakespearean villain mode was so damn satisfying. It was so like just camp and fun, and yes, I was all about it because it's been set up that it was going to happen this whole time, and I was just waiting for it to go down, and then it finally goes down, you're like, yes, get in there. So I'm fine. And there were some choices that were so batshit crazy. I was like, oh my God, yes. This is hilarious and insane, and I'm kind of here for it. So I want to talk about that. I don't know where my other marker has gone. I will eventually find it. Maybe. But we're going to talk about this episode, and maybe my marker will show up after I'm done. But yeah, so I actually liked it. I feel like this series does a really good job of like developing Akane's character. I'm like, hell yeah. Akane's character, she develops so much, and she's still developing. So I'm glad we still have more content. I'm also glad we have more content because I could see someone maybe not be satisfied with where Mika's character is, because unlike Genoza in season 1, who goes through a full character arc, Mika doesn't do that. Mika kind of gets halfway through a character arc, and if the show ended here and that was it, I'd be like, that kind of sucks. But knowing that there's more content to come, I'm like, oh, they still can develop Mika's character, because there's things that are left unsaid that Mika is not acknowledging, that Akane and Mika do not know that each other knows about the system. Neither of them know that. And that's something going into future movies and seasons that I'm like, okay, they both have interacted with the Sybil system, it has had the opposite effect for each. And the influences that they've both encountered kind of is lending to that development. And we're going to talk about it and put Whiteboard Kun to the task up here. But I think there's still a lot of room for Mika's character to grow. There's a lot of room for Ganoza to have influence with that. Sugo and Ganoza, we'll talk about them. Kunazuka and Hinakawa's kind of opened up this season. He developed a little bit over it all. I feel bad Saiga is going back into the layer, but honestly, with as quick as Sybil system is to just be batshit crazy and on the fly decide, you've got to die, let Saiga go back. I was like, get him out of here, let him be safe, please, and if we need him, we'll come get him. That sounds like a great plan. But you kind of knew going into this season that unlike season 1, where I was like, is Mikishima going to live to see another day or is he going to die? It kind of was set up to where Kamui has to die, has to happen. He's kind of this Frankenstein's monster that can't be able to go on, and we're going to address that. And then Togane had to go. Absolutely. I just love the idea that the Sybil system turns on the Toganes, and the Sybil system is like, oh yeah, maybe we made a mistake. And the Sybil system's like, we're going to rectify that, and now we're all good again. We did a cleanse. We got rid of the glitches. See, we're perfect again. Everything's fine. Sometimes you just need to do an update. And I'm like, sometimes you just got to update the system. And I'm like, oh my God, this system is insane. But we're going to talk about this because there are a few moments where I'm like, how does that work? And what does that do? And they try to justify it. Whether or not you are convinced by the justification, I think is what we need to talk about. But I'm kind of okay with all of it. If you tell me that you didn't like this season as much as season 1, valid. I think it's fine. But if you tell me this season's garbage, I'm like, but there's a lot of really cool things happening in it, and there was a lot of great moments. So I would say I liked this season. I found it fun, and I found it definitely, what I appreciate about it is it doesn't try to recreate lightning in a bottle. And that makes me very happy because so many times in movies and in media, you get this lightning in a bottle scenario where it's just this perfect combination of things. And then if there's a sequel series or a sequel movie or something like that, they try to recreate it. They try to recreate the same formula and it doesn't work. And you're like, no, it's not the same. And I appreciate that Psycho-Pass is like, look, we can't recreate Mikishima's diva-ness. We can't recreate his book club. We can't recreate the Sherlock and Moriarty dynamic between Kogami and Mikishima in season 2. So it doesn't try to. Instead, it leans more into kind of like a more, not necessarily psychological route, but into like a more moral discussion of how do we define society? Is it individual versus group thinking? It goes a different route with it, which I think is smart. And it doesn't try to necessarily pit characters against each other in the same ways, which is smart of the show to do. And I appreciate that because it made it more fun for me to watch. I wasn't just watching the same thing over again, right? Kamui is not Mikishima. Togane was not Mikishima. It was fine. I honestly liked it a lot. And I liked that Akane, Togane, I don't find Togane attractive, but I really like Togane as a villain because he just goes ham. He just goes full Shakespeare. He just gets full antagonistic mode. He loses his freaking mind this episode. And I was like, oh my God, it was so fun to watch because you're just like, shit, he's batshit crazy. And you just know that you're going to get payoff with what's being set up. And right off the bat, he tries to tell Akane, he's like, well, your grandmother died because of Kamui. And here's the thing. Kamui doesn't deny any of it. He doesn't like say, oh, it wasn't me. He doesn't try it because he knows. He's like, I didn't do any of this. And I feel like the desperation that Togane is giving off, the more he realizes Akane is not falling for his plans, the more desperate he becomes. And she's just not buying it. And he just gets more and more frustrated and flustered out of it. And his crime coefficient raises to like 800. And it's like, oh my God. And then, of course, the Dominator doesn't let him die. I like it first. At first, it's not that the Dominator is shut off. It's that Akane steps in the way and is in the line of fire. And I like that Akane, she goes the higher ground. She's like, it's unlikely Kamui had anything to do with the murder because he's not taunting me with it. He's not trying to deny it. Quit being an asshole. I was like, yes. And she's like, plus, at the end of the day, she's like, I consulted the ghost of Kogami, my ex-flame, and he told me that I should be, trying to do it for the sake of justice. And for the sake of justice, I can't just pass judgment on somebody without objective proof. And he had the means to obtain information, but so did everyone else. I like that she's not a target. And then I like that Togane has the nerve to say, well, you'd rather this criminal be suspect than you'd suspect your colleagues over this criminal. And I'm like, that was the wrong thing to say. Because Akane, back in season 1, was told by the Sybil system the same thing. And Ganoza was like, he's an enforcer. He's a latent criminal. You're trusting him over the Sybil system. And Akane's like, yeah. And so I feel like the moment Togane said that, I was like, oh, you just said the wrong thing to Akane. Because Akane loves Kogami. And she believed him over the Sybil system. So yes, absolutely she would. That's in line with her character. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Nobody, it's like you can't play favoritism in justice. And Togane is asking her to play favoritism. And she's like, that's not how justice works. And I'm like, yeah. It's so satisfying to see her just walk away from him with Kamui. And he's just losing his mind, being like, no, you can't leave my mother. And I was like, oh my God, it's great. And she asked Kamui to come. And just him just losing it's like, how don't you dare mock me? I won't let you disgrace my mother. Let's get past this OP. I did like the OP. I liked it. The song and everything is really good. I'm glad to see it in the ED one more time. It's nicely done. I love that this episode's called What Color? And it's in white. And she's crystal clear, our girl Akane. And I'm glad the Sybil system finally acknowledges that they kind of want her. And we'll get to that point. But man, so the ones that are following Kamui using the arrows to try and fire at the enforcers. Poor Ganoza getting a damn arrow in the arm. I pulled out my arm muscle a week ago, and it still is sore. After a week, it's still giving me it feels awful. And so I can't imagine having an arrow in my arm. That sounds like the worst. And I do like that they acknowledge that Kamui, despite Kamui trying to judge the system and point out its flaws, Kamui is still an antagonist, and his death is justified because he hurt so many people, and he was getting Shizui hooked on these drugs just like Togane's foundation did. It was just which of these two evils are you more comfortable with? And the Sybil system says it turns out the answer is neither. So my one complaint, I think, like I said, begin at the earlier part of this discussion with episode 10, is Shizui's character. She does drink the Kool-Aid. I was really hoping for an arc with her character where she kind of tried to turn on Kamui, even if it wasn't successful. But instead we just get, no, she drank the Kool-Aid, was all about the cult. And I'm kind of that's kind of meh. I'm kind of meh with her character. I do like that Ganoza has come a long way to be, and I like that he's she'd go that far for him by doing a neuroactive drug. He's she really fell for him. That sweater vest loser, really? I do appreciate Ganoza has changed since season 1, because season 1 Ganoza would probably have killed her, right? He probably would have done the lethal mode, but because he's an enforcer now, he sort of is you know what? Nah, I'm just gonna stun her and let her go. And then Hinakawa, I was so terrified the entire episode, the entire season, that Hinakawa and Kunozuka were gonna die. I was convinced that Togane or Mika was going to be responsible for their deaths. And I was like, please don't. Please don't. We've just gotten to where I really like Kunozuka and what she represents as being this calming force. And I love Hinakawa and his precious beanness. I'm like, please don't kill them off for the sake of killing them off. I feel like Kagari and Masaoka's deaths in season 1 have taught us as the audience to not get comfortable with characters living. Whether they live or not, don't get comfortable because they could die. And I'm like, and it does add this stake to it, being yeah, they could die at any moment. Oh no. So then we have, going through here, this whole thing about Kamui going through the motions and showing each and every phase of him. It reminded me of the movie Split. by M. Night Shyamalan. And in that movie, James McAvoy, he plays a character that has multiple personalities, and they all kind of take over at various points. I have a lot of issues with that movie only because of how it portrays people that are perhaps have bipolar disorder or multiple personality disorder. It portrays them as villainous, which I have a problem with that being used as a trope, because if you know anyone that has that disorder, it's like, should they be constantly portrayed as villains? But here, I'm kind of okay with it because he is literally a Frankenstein of actual bodies and different people. So he's a hive mind. And I think that it's kind of cool that they show us everything going through Kamui at this moment, because it's imitating what the Sybil system is. And I think up until this episode, we kind of get comfortable the last couple episodes with Togane's mom being the one brain that's in charge right now. So she's the one that has the say in the mission. But then as we find out, no, the Sybil system is not just one brain in charge. It is a hive mind that makes decisions and then carries them out as a collective. So I like that this body is just kind of depending on who is in charge of Kamui. But Akane's like, I want you to judge Sybil system. And then we see all the different ones that are inside of him, like just talking about what to do. And they're like, what do you expect Sybil to do? Do you want it to bring an end to itself? What is the judgment in this ideal society where humanity is sacrificed? So let's talk about that. So the Sybil system, we're going to put the Sybil system up here. And they're asking, like, what is the judgment that is ideal? What is the judgment that's ideal in all of this? What are we trying to get out of it? What is the point of having them be judged? If humanity is sacrificed, what's the point? And then we see all the versions of Kamui that's like, I want the Sybil system to be judged. And Akane doesn't really, she's like, there's another possibility. All of you are aware of it, aren't you? That even though it's not necessarily true that you'll get the answer that you want. You all want the system to be judged and you want it to be infallible, but there's a chance you might not like what you see. Are you still going to go forward? And Kamui is like, well, we all died and I looked for a meaning of living as a dead person, and here I am. So I can't just stop now. Everyone's suffering from violence that's referred to as healing, and I have to save them. Sybil needs to be brought to justice. There's no other way to save them. People's anger makes society clear. This is a game between Sybil and us. So yeah, all these different versions of Kamui are like, no, we came this far to judge Sybil. We can't turn back now. We have to see it through and see what we get. And Akane's like, well, you could have chosen another method that didn't mean becoming the champion of all those who hold a grudge against society. She's like, you could have probably found a way to go behind the scenes and not kill other people. I'm just saying. I like that Akane kind of holds Kamui accountable and is like, yeah, sure, I get why you want to judge Sybil. Me too. But probably could have found a way to do it without killing people. Just saying. And Kamui kind of argues with her and is like, no, that's not an option. Even if I'd been able to talk to you sooner, it would have had to go down this way. And so I like that there's just conversation. I like Akane like challenges them and is like, yeah, I'm helping take you to Sybil because I want to see the result, but I'm not forgetting what you did. And then Kasai's there with the Togane mother's brain inside of her. And she's like, here we go. And they're like, Misako Togane. And Akane's like, yeah, we haven't come to this conclusion. And that's when, what's interesting is that they basically acknowledge that Akane's rights have been rescinded. I'm assuming that the plan of action then was, since they can't use the Dominators on her, they were just going to arrest her and take her into custody and possibly put her in prison or isolation. I'm guessing that was what was going to happen, right? They're like, leave and die like the dog you are. I was like, and Akane's like, no, I'm going to go behind those doors and ask Sybil to give an answer. And that's when Kamui and them point the Dominators at each other. And they're like, we ask you, what is your color? Can you see our color? And what is yours? Oof. Meanwhile, we get Togane. And this whole scene with Togane, oh my God, I freaking loved it. Because Togane is a legit serial killer. Togane is Norman Bateman. Togane, like, is like, as long as I have my mom, I don't need anything else. And it's like the same desk that he carried to his office, the same damn laptop that he carried in there. It's in this little tiny corner of this room. And he's like, and he has little headphones on. As long as I had mother, I didn't need anything else. Like, he's just so obsessed with his mom and the idea that as she cuts his hair, she's like, I'm going to say goodbye. Here's the thing. She didn't realize the monster that she made. Like, she was like, I have this asymptomatic child that's going to be exactly like me and be totally emotionless and fine with that. And she's like, I'm going to become part of the hive mind. I'm so excited. It's going to be great. You're asymptomatic. You'll be fine. You won't have to worry about things. But the crazy thing is, she doesn't realize, she thinks, oh, because he's this killing machine, he doesn't have any emotions. He doesn't have any attachment to anyone because he can so easily kill this puppy and be fine. But that's not how humans work. And that's so fascinating to me that it's like, no, he developed this like yandere love for his mother and was willing to kill for her, but then was like, if you're not going to have me, I'm not going to let anybody else have you either. It's kind of insane. And then he doesn't understand why she's going to the Sybil system. And then he sits there at night and thinks like, and she's like, eventually you'll be led to the same place too. So the crazy thing is, she was like, look, I'm going to go get my brain taken out and put in the Sybil system, but you're asymptomatic, so eventually you'll join me as well. And it's like, no, that's not what ends up happening. So I guess if I was going to complain about the brains becoming not asymptomatic anymore, I guess we could tie back to the fact that Togane was supposed to be asymptomatic, but then he didn't become so. He ended up getting corrupted, and his psychopaths ended up actually changing. So Togane is kind of this model of showing an asymptomatic person to become clouded. And honestly, Akane starts to get up there. Like, hers got up to 87.9 and may have climbed higher after he reveals that he killed the grandma if Kamui hadn't stepped in. So this series points out that the system, and that's kind of the funny thing, is the system tells us that asymptomatic people don't ever raise it, but we know now, it's the, omnipotent paradox. We know now the system lies, and the system isn't always correct. So yeah, I guess you can say like, oh, well, that world building that's making like a mistake in the world building and it's a plot hole. But then I'm like, but the system has set up this season to tell us it's a liar. So, and it's very willing to be petty and judgmental and hypocritical for its own benefit, kind of like people can be. So it's, you can say it's making this statement, but Togane proves how someone that seems to be asymptomatic, once they form this direct attachment, can in fact be clouded. And then he's like, no, he's like, I'm not letting you go. And he stabs her. You belong to me. And then that's when she gets taken to the Sybil system anyway. It ends up happening regardless. And yeah, that's when her brain gets taken away. And the idea of him being in this little cell, like imprisoned as like naked in this cell, screaming as it goes back and forth to her becoming part of the Sybil system, is so well done and terrifying. And then he gets brought in where she's like, I'm now part of the system. See, everything's fine now. I got painted black. And then he's like, well, it's my job to cloud everyone's psychopaths and administer judgment on them so I can keep you pure, mother. That's my reason for existence. Like, he's like, his love is literally like yandere, and he's just killing people to like make her look better. It's so like Psycho, which is Psychopaths, but it reminds me of the movie Psycho. It's so Norman Bateman. It's so creepy. It's serial killer. It's Shakespearean. I'm 1,000 times here for it. I'm like, yes, let Togane be this maniacal madness. I'm totally fine with it. And he's like, I'm mad to the point where I will cut my thumb off to like get out of this handcuff. Insanity. So yeah, the two of them go on there. He's like, if you consider yourselves the gods of judgment, then there's only one choice before you. The existence you need to overcome in order for you to stay as you are is right in front of you. So yeah, they basically tell the Sybil system, they're like, hey, this lady that this brain that they've that you've gotten a hold of, she probably needs to go because she's clouding your system and she's a mistake. It's literally trying to use its own psychology against the Sybil system, being like, hey, get rid of this Togane woman, and you can go back to being perfect. And he's like, can you question our color and your own? And finally asks the Sybil system, to consider itself. And that's when it says the crime coefficient's over 300 with Togane. And she's like, what? And she's like, this is your color, Masako Togane. Now the question is, of course, is it her actual color? Is it her color? Is it the Sybil system manipulating? She's supposed to be asymptomatic, but we've established with Togane that might not be the case. Everybody's been questioning the psychopath hue of Akane this whole time, but they weren't aiming the guns at themselves. I don't know. It is a question, and if you say that it's a plot hole, I fully am fine with you saying that. It's fine. And then I like that little shot of him and his like Frankenstein-ness. And then she, of course, she's like, I won't accept a change like this. So yeah, so it ends up, I personally think that the psychopaths, that the Sybil system's like, yeah, let's get rid of this brain. And they alter it themselves. The moment she blew up, though, I was like, oh, Togane's going to flip. He's going to freaking lose it the moment he sees her with her little green goop brain. Mm-hmm. And so then, yeah, they're like, the time for judgment has come to go down to the Sybil system and judge each other as a group. I also like the idea that they establish that as a group of clear individuals, it can tarnish itself. It can tarnish itself as a collective. That's an interesting concept because it's suggesting that, yeah, you may have a group of great people that are perfectly fine, but through their interactions, through their evolution together as a group, they can actually tarnish themselves. And that's kind of an interesting concept that, yeah, by themselves, people can be clear, but you get them in a group setting, they can actually influence each other in a way that tarnishes them, which is fascinating. And Mikishima was always alone and acting alone. I mean, he incorporated people into his lives, but not like to the extent that like you have a mom and a son, right? So that's an interesting concept to see, like, is it saying that a group of good people, if they're placed in the right circumstance with the wrong factors against them, can't turn into something ugly? That's a very interesting question to ask. And so we have all of the members there. I like all the ghosts simultaneously point the fingers as the dominators towards the Sybil system and ask to judge it. And the brain that shows up is over 300, the crime coefficient. And they're like, we could destroy the Sybil system this way. This is your color, Sybil. And at that point, they're like, oh, wait, I like the Sybil system because it is this entity. And because they're a hive mind, and because they're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on. They're like, I'm so glad you came, Kamui. I'm so glad you've come and you've judged us. Oh my gosh, our crime coefficient as a group has gone up. We are so enlightened now that you've shown us that a group coefficient can be altered. We hadn't considered that possibility. So you know what? We're going to do one solid and help remedy the situation. They're like, upon deliberation, we've decided we would acknowledge all of you. Like, we would recognize you. We've had a council meeting. We talked about it. Because the thing of it is, I was wondering if the Sybil system was having a council meeting and involving Togane. I think they were just like, oh, Togane's the bad apple. We figured that out. Oh, Togane was the bad apple that seemed like asynchronous, but we saw through her son that wasn't the case. And she corrupted the group, so we had to take her out. But now we have these corrupted elements. So what are we going to do? We're going to take them out too and solve the problem. She's like, we decided to acknowledge all of you. And they're like, also, as Akane suggested, we will institute a collective psychopaths. And then we will discard any elements that increase our crime coefficient. So I like that it makes the boxes black, like it paints them black. And they're like, look, all these bad elements that were possibly going to corrupt us, like Togane, we've gotten rid of those. We've attained a new awareness and a perfection now. I like to look, we got rid of all the bad things. We got rid of, look at these brains that were possibly going to corrupt us. We got rid of them. We're totally fine now. We course corrected. We put a patch on the virus. We're great. This is our way of evolving. Yeah. And then the target's threat judgment has been updated. And now the crime coefficient is 0. I like the civil system's like, problem solved. Look what we did. It's wild. I really liked that the civil system is such, and he's like, this is the answer. And then she's like, look, Kamui, you are under arrest. So it's like, Kamui, look, you got your answer. You judged the civil system, and the civil system responded in kind and was like, well, I thank you for judging us. Oh my God, look at these bad apples. How'd they get in here? Oh, let's take those out. Now we're good. We're back to normal. We just had to do an update. We just had to do a scan, had to do a little cleanup. Everything's great now. Oh my God. Meanwhile, we've got like all the drones and everything taking out the rest of Kamui's group, which they get out. And then, oh yeah, the one guy from Division 3 with the glasses, he lived. So good for him. Good for him. Poor Kamui's group is dead. So then there's Mika and Kunozuka. And Mika figures out as Shisui is like about to be taken out. Look at Shugo. Look at Sugo coming in there and saving them. I was really worried that, again, with the bombs and the detonators, doesn't it mimic season 1? You would think Genoza's like, how many bad guys gotta threaten me and with bombs around people I care about? How many times we gotta do this? But I like that Sugo comes in and legit is like best bro with Genoza and saves him. I'm like, look at him. Look at this. Because he's like, no. And then she thanks Kamui, which we've talked about her character development. Whatevs. And then Sugo uses the sniper rifle. I like that Sugo kind of like gets back for Ayanagi. He doesn't kill Shisui, which he could have, but he doesn't because he's able to see who it is and analyze the situation. He's able to like just knock her out. And that's it. Also, I want to say this. I know we didn't get a lot of moments for Akane and Genoza to be shipped together. I personally am still in the, like, especially after this season, I'm like Akane and Kogami's ghost. Still shipping them. For me, Genoza and Akane are like best friends, co-workers. I'm not quite at the level I want to ship Akane and Genoza that much yet because it kind of like we faded away, especially after Ayanagi died. Let me tell you what though, enemies to lovers, Genoza and Sugo. Whenever he's like, Genoza's like, good, we got this solved. And he's like, hey, Sugo. And he's like, sup, bro? And he gives him like the chest pat. And he's like, you made it in time this time. And Sugo's like, I did, man. And Genoza's like, eh. I was like, oh, Genoza, our bisexual king? Is him and Sugo gonna be a thing? I'm kind of here for it. I'm supporting it. Like, that soft look that Genoza gave Sugo, I don't know if he ever gave Kogami that soft a look before, but he definitely didn't give Ayanagi that soft a look. I was like, ooh. Are Sugo and Genoza my new ship? I think they might be my new ship. I think I'm on board with this. I'm like, make Genoza our bisexual king. I'm living for it. I'm fine with it. Go for it, dudes. I'm right here for you. Yes. Like, let's get her back. Meanwhile, Togane is like, you're an inspector. You should know my location. Oh my God. And he's like, get over here. He's like, we're going to take care of this. And you know what? Good for Mika for being like, this is all his fault. Screw him. I'm not going to listen to what he says. But the moment he saw his mom, oh my God, insane. And she's like, fine, I'm not going to listen to what Togane says. I'm getting out of here. I like that Genoza is kind of like, Mika, where are you going? What you doing? She's like, just keep with Sugo and them. You guys are fine. I'm like, or keep with the one guy from Division 3, the Dominato or whatever his name is. D'Amato or whatever. She's like, yeah, I'm going to go do this. And On paper, Mika is not good at her job. She's really not, but I don't blame her for going after Togane to make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. But so they're like, okay. My one question is, he's like, what color am I now? It's recommended you administer justice immediately. And she's like, don't resist and hand over the Dominator. He's like, I can feel it. Even some in that thing are happy to have their own color black. And she's like, happy? He's like, why aren't you pointing the Dominator at Sybil? And I'm like, if it's a collective entity, then the one who's holding the Dominator becomes part of it. So I get what he's trying to say here. He would like for Akane to be the omnipotent one, to judge them all. He's like, you're the only one whose crime coefficient isn't turning black. We've seen from the Sybil system that its is turning black, mine is turning black. Yours is the only one that isn't. So you should be the judge of all this. And Akane's like, I don't want all that responsibility, thank you. Thank you. Akane's like, I didn't sign up to be a god. So no thank you. No thanks. The one thing I am curious about is how Kamui's crime coefficient finally went up when it's not been able to be registered this whole time. That part I don't know, but it seems like the Sybil system expects Akane to kind of still be its mascot and its judge in a way, as Kamui said. If you told me it was silly that Kamui's crime coefficient raised up enough for it to be killed, I could see that, because I don't exactly know why it went up, unless suddenly it realized as a collective that its crime coefficient could go up, or that it was fine with part of it being black. It almost seems like he's suggesting that Sybil system is okay with their own color being black, so he is now too. I don't know. If someone else points at that thing, it may show a different color. He's like, there's no longer any going back for Sybil. When a true judge appears someday, no matter how many brains it removes, its crime coefficient may remain high. Yeah, at this point, Kamui is suggesting that someday the crime coefficient cannot go back for Sybil. Yeah, it cannot go back. It's kind of suggesting that there is a very high possibility the Sybil system is going to become like Kogami and get to a point where it can't keep erasing the factors that make its crime coefficient rise. It's eventually going to be proven that it's going to have to be taken out, and it's going to be waiting for someone to judge it. And he's like, and he's suggesting Akane is that judge, not him. He's like, yeah, it's going to need a judge, and you're the one to do it. And Akane's like, I did not sign up for this. And she's like, was this your plan from the start, to like put that seed in Sybil System's mind that's going to happen? And he's like, yep. And he's like, you need to administer justice to the Sybil System. It's possible that judge might be the person standing in front of me. And she's like, really? She's like, I didn't ask for this. She's like, stop. And she's like, I'm not you. I'm not going to take the wishes of others upon myself. I like that she says that. I like that she's like, look, you have the wishes of like 180 people inside of you trying to dictate what you do, like the Sybil System. She's like, I am not that. I don't do what people are telling me to do. I'm just doing my own form of justice. Yeah. If only you had chosen a way that didn't lead to other people getting hurt, this probably wouldn't happen. And he's like, that's not an option. Him saying that, no, to get here, people had to get hurt. And that was the price to pay to reveal everything with the system. And I'm like, meanwhile, Togane comes in, and I love his like desecrators. He's just like fire and brimstone. He comes in like, bitch, I gotta kill him. Like, just, I like Kamui is calm through this whole thing and is like, nope, we had to kill people to get here. And now we're being judged. That's all we've wanted. And Togane's like, just barrels through and is like, bitch, I'll judge you. And it's like, yes. And he's like looking at her, and her crime coefficient was 48, which was a little bit higher than normal. And he's like, yeah. And he's like, I was the one who killed Izzy. He's like, goes full Sith Lord, goes full Dark Sidious. And she's like, Darth Sidious. And she's like, what? And he's like, bitch, how dare you? And it does make her crime coefficient go up. It does raise to like 50 and then 87.9 as she's trying to hold it back. And just as it's about to raise any higher, he's like, there's another option. You're aware of it too, aren't you? The spirit of the law is what you want to protect. And if that becomes the scales of justice that weighs all society equally, then that spirit may change that monster there into a real God someday. So he's suggesting, he's like, there is this spirit of the law that does balance the scales equally. And what he's suggesting is, if you maintain that, there is a possibility that you can affect the Sybil system in the future. Because, yeah, Togane's mom was trying to, take over Sybil system and use it for her own means. And eventually, Akane got to the point where the Sybil system realized that. And were like, oh, this being's trying to, take control of all of us. Nope. And plucked it out. So, Kamui is suggesting that at some point, Akane's influence could make the Sybil system into something better, with not necessarily worse. And Akane's like, I don't want that responsibility. I don't blame her. But he's like, it could change it into a real God someday. And it's like, ugh, that's terrifying. And Akane's like, really? And then Kamui's like, okay. And then it goes back down again. Kamui convinces her. And I think that was Kamui's point the whole time. He's like, I know I'm going to be judged by the system and I'm going to die eventually. I feel like you have Kamui's psychopaths, and maybe that's the explanation for it. Kamui's psychopaths was low because of how clear they were in their purpose, but there were other parts of him that would raise that significantly. Again, like the Sybil system, there were parts of it corrupting the whole. The entity may have all seemed pure, but then they slowly were corrupted. And they corrupted each other, so whatever. But I like that Kamui, talks her off the ledge, and then Togane just gets so pissed. Yeah, there's no way you can be more pure than my mother. And it's like, oh my God. And then they fire at each other. Mm-hmm. Which is honestly what I thought was going to happen between Kogami and Mikishima back in season 1. So we get this. The thing about it is, Kogami, or in this case, Kamui, shoots Togane in the shoulder and blows it up. Kind of like what happened with Kaide. I'm glad they set that up earlier, that Kaide, you can get shot by the Dominator and only have a limb taken off if you don't aim properly. Meanwhile, all of Kamui gets hit and they just all explode. And Akane's like, why does this always happen to me? And then Togane's like, why is your soul not turning black? And she's like, you're under arrest for suspicion of murdering Aoi Tsunemori, and he runs away. And then that's when the Sybil system's like, oh, Inspector, it is gratifying that I love how just batshit crazy the system is. It's nuts. It's gratifying that following your suggestion, we were able, what does it say here? We solved the problems we've been discussing amongst us all this time. I like that the Sybil system basically says, we've been debating amongst ourselves this entire season while Togane's mom was taking over and being a crazy wench. And, we had kind of taken in these things into account, but you've enlightened us, and now we're glad that we went through and solved the problem. Ah! And they said, however, with our current processing ability, we cannot institute a collective psychopath for all of society as of yet. So the system says that the collective is not ready. It's still a work in progress. They're like, yeah, we figured out now through Kamui and all this that we're not ready for a collective psychopath for all of society. There's still some kinks to work out. We recognize that. But because we're flawless, we're going to keep working on it. And it's like, oh my God. In order for that day to come, we recommend you continue to keep doing your duty and contribute to society and live a healthy life. I just love that Akane's like, oh my God. After this, the Sybil system is like, yeah, we want you to keep doing your job. We're going to keep hiring you. It was very wrong for her to try to rescind your position. We need you to help make us a better system. And it's so crazy because for Akane, she's like, I can't get out of this. To keep society, going along with this sense of justice that I purported back in season 1, I've got to keep doing what the Sybil system wants me to do. Even though I know that it's completely insane. This is the best way to go about it. And it's like, yeah. And then, damn, Mika showing up. She's like, a child of Sybil, don't make me laugh. You're pitch black. I love Mika is able to realize the hypocrisy of Togane. And she's like, oh, really? You're perfection? Nah, absolutely not. But she doesn't get a chance to kill him. She was going to kill him, which she doesn't know Akane's arrest warrant. And then he dies. And he's like, you and I are both slaves to Sybil after all. And she's like, I can't forgive myself for obeying you. And I can't remain clear unless I do this. The thing that's so crazy is she's like, I have to kill you to remain clear so you can't keep telling me to do these awful things. And he's like, oh, so she's your new slave, huh? He's like, yeah, basically acknowledging that Mika is kind of becoming him. That Mika's kind of becoming Togane in a way. And that is character development. That is. It's just not the character development you want. But it's Togane suggesting, no, Mika, by her suggesting that she has to kill me to keep her psychopaths clear, that's exactly the experiments that were happening to me when I was a kid. I was killing things to keep myself satiated, just like the hunter in season 1 was killing people to keep his psychopaths clear. He's like, you're becoming like me. He's like, I was targeting the wrong person. I was trying to paint Akane black. I should have gone after Mika. Because she's in the same boat that I am, and she doesn't even realize it. And I'm like, oh my God, yes, absolutely. That development is so good. And then he dies. Do your best to live to keep Sybil beautiful. Oh my God, which is exactly what he was doing for his mom. And she's like, someone who clouds my psychopaths should disappear. But he's dead and it doesn't work. And then that's when she kind of has a freak out moment. And she's like, I can't go any further than this. And her saying, I'll keep the secret. I'll forget about everything. Yeah. She's like, I don't know anything. She's like, I trust Sybil and I love this society. She's like, I'm like, is she going to become a Shakespearean villain like Togane? She kind of is going on the same route. So it's going to be interesting to see if Mika kind of follows the route that Togane is on, in not necessarily treating the Sybil system like her mom, but treating the Sybil system as this perfection that she has to maintain. Because Akane, it's so funny, Mika and Akane are on different vibes, where Akane is constantly holding the Sybil system accountable and trying to keep it to where it's serving the justice it needs to, and when it's not, calling it into account. And the Sybil system kind of reveres Akane, so it goes along with it. But then you have Mika, who is trying to keep the Sybil system afloat because that's the only justification for her existence she can present. And it's like, it's crazy. It's crazy. So, yeah. Wild. Just wildness, y'all. And so then, yeah, I like when they were gonna hurt Akane and like take her into custody, and Genoza's like, no! Genoza's like, that's my sister, bitches, don't you dare! And then Hinakawa was like, well, no, she's been reinstated. Good on you, Hinakawa. Good on you, Genoza. Way to go. Love it. And she says, what color am I now? And I feel like Genoza's kind of proud of her, like, you're clear. I love that shot of him and Hinakawa. He looks so good there. He's like, you're clear. And I love Hinakawa's in the background praying like, please let it be clear. Please let it be clear. Hinakawa, my love. I love him so much. Yes. What an angel. And then Genoza smiles and he's like, clear as crystal. So then Mika's like, I found Togane and he's dead. And Mika and Akane's like, yep. There we go. She's like, damn it. And then Saiga goes back. And she's like, well, your psychopath's on the way to recovery. And he's like, I know why it's recovering. Being dependent doesn't quite suit me, so. He's like, I don't want to be dependent upon you. I'm like, Going back to what Togane told him. I hope Saiga gets to come back and help in the future. I hope he's their calling card, that if they need help, they can just call Saiga and he gets to go through it. And then I like that she's like, a man who clouds the psychopaths he touches She's like, I feel like I missed my chance. I feel like Kunozuka is full on. She's definitely like only into the ladies. I feel like Shion is bisexual. She could go either way. She's like, damn, should have asked Kunozuka if she was open to a threesome. Damn it, missed my chance. Ah! And then, yeah. This scene, though, at the very end where Kunozuka, speaking of which, is having tea with Mika, it's like it turns out that Togane was the one who leaked information on Inspector Tsunemori's grandmother, but we don't know how he obtained that information. And the thing about it is, Mika is the one that got him that information. And Mika knows it. And the thing is that Kunozuka in this moment, and because Mika's like, well, that's unfortunate. And Kunozuka's like, whoever that person is, I will never forgive them. Because it caused Akane's grandma to die. And the thing that gets me is that Mika goes, yeah, I'll never forgive them either. Because it's like the one person Mika really looks up to, Kunozuka, is like, if I find out it's you, I'll never forgive you. And Mika's like, I can never forgive myself for what I've done. So I don't know. Mika's character does fascinate me a little bit because she could go either way. She could grow in a way that makes her a better person, kind of like we've seen happen with Akane and Ganoza, or she could go full on and become Togane Part 2. Electric Boogaloo. So Mika's character was so frustrating this season, but I'm fascinated by her because I want to see what she does. Is she going to become someone that's going to be beneficial to Akane and Ganoza and the crew, or is she going to become a villain? And we have to see what happens, right? We have to see where that goes. Meanwhile, Kasai, the new brains have taken over, and they're like, some of us suggested that we bring you in. That we make you part of the collective. If you wish for change, why don't you try instituting change from the inside? So this whole time I've been like, yeah, she's kind of asymptomatic. Even though we've seen her crime coefficient go up, she's able to control it. They're like, we thought about bringing you in and letting you become part of the hive mind. Are you interested in becoming part of the collective? And Akane's like, hell no. She's like, I know that you're not that interested in me, so why are you trying to provoke me? I like Akane's like, I'm not really asymptomatic, so don't make me laugh. Don't pull my gut. Like, let's be real. She's like, come on now. And they're like, are you turning it down? Our offer? And she's like, yeah, for now. When the time comes that you yourselves decide to be rid of you, then she says, I'll go to hell with you. That is a statement. So Akane is like, I will follow the Sybil system and keep you all accountable until the moment you decide to destroy yourselves. And when that happens, yeah, I'll go to hell with you because I've kept this up so long. Because, yeah, Akane is acknowledging, she's like, my actions have made it to where people have died. And I can't take that back. And so the only thing that would do right by those people that have died because of my actions is whenever you all fall, I'll fall with you. And then I'll go to hell with you for what I've done. Like, bitchin', what a badass. I'm like, yes, Akane! Freaking love her. And then the Sybil system is like a collective psychopaths. In the not so distant future, there'll be a society where groups become the standard. The possibility that even if the individual is clear, the group isn't. The doubts and fears that arise from that may lead to disarray. So yeah, it's the idea that eventually everybody's going to be like the Borg and be this hive mind in a collective. Society may engage in an unprecedented witch hunt. And the thing about it is, if you think about it, we already kind of have that in society now, where we view like corporations as entities rather than groups of individuals. So it's like you have a corporation, for example, that may be made up of really good individuals that are fine, but the corporation and what it represents can be destructive and horrible. And so then what do you do with that? Where do you place the blame? On the entity itself, on the collective, or on the individuals? We have that now. It's insane. Like in the US, there are laws that make corporations have rights like people, and their corporations are groups of people. So it's like, how do you judge that? So it's kind of already existing, and that's kind of insane, but it's already happening, so it's weird. And they're like, society may engage in an unprecedented witch hunt. As a result, judgments can turn into massacres. Yeah, when we view groups and collectives as worthy of judgment, what do? Do we kill the mass involved, or do we weed out the bad apples? How do we pass judgment on them? It's asking some questions. It's like, yeah, how do you judge? Oh, it's crazy. Judgments can turn into massacres. And it's you who opened that door. And so Kasai is like, you're the one that made this possible. You opened all this up. And Akane's like, I'm not that pessimistic. What comes of this might be righteous. She's like, you're looking at this as it's going to lead into chaos and massacres and mass death. She's like, or it could lead to more law and order and peace and freedom. I'm going to stay here to make sure it's probably the latter rather than the former. Such optimism, just like you. She's like, maybe it's optimistic, but we don't know until we try. It's not society that determines people's futures, but people that determine the society. I love that Akane sticks to her beliefs and that everything that Kogami has taught her has led her to that. I love it. And then we get her at the end in the apartment, like it's all cleaned out, like she's getting ready to leave, like she's getting ready to move somewhere else. And she puts the one cigarette that's in the smoke there in the ashtray. Did she smoke it? I don't know. Or did she not? We don't know for sure, right? Does it show her in that image whether she's smoking it? Nah, it just shows her holding it and it's smoking in her hand. Yeah. So, oh my gosh. I know there's a movie next. I know nothing about it, of course. I don't want to know anything about it. We'll find out when we get to it, but I'm super excited to see what happens, of course. But I really am glad I finished season 2. I'm glad that Kunazuka and Hinakawa lived. I'm glad they're all safe. I'm so happy. Mika is still fascinating to me. I'm curious to see where her character goes. I love Akane stuck to her guns, followed her ideals, was fine by the end of it. Sybil system's nuts, but we'll just see what happens in the movie, won't we? Ha-ha! Yeah! We'll see what happens. So, y'all, I'm excited to know your thoughts down below. Please, no spoilers, hints, or clues, but we are chugging forward and moving on next week to look at Psycho Pass the movie. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more Psycho Pass. Bye!